365 Sports and Baylor Director of Athletics, Mack Rhoades, in studio with us today. Craig Smoke, Paul Catalina, and I'm David Smoke. It's been a while since we had a chance to visit with you. A lot has gone on. A lot is still unchanged. How do you manage it, literally, with the House settlement approved and yet so many questions, and even that may not lead to much? Are we in a better place in college athletics than we were perhaps even last summer?
I do think we are in a better place. Judge Wilkins, finally approving the settlement was a step forward. And I think it was a much needed step. But I only think it's, and you alluded to this, I only think it's step one in a series of steps that need to follow. And seminal moment in college athletics. And, all of us, I think over the last 12 to 18 months have been really challenged to be flexible, adaptable, patient, which isn't, one of my greatest virtues. But I think to your point, we're in a better place. I think this stops the bleeding. I think the last 24 months has been just really chaotic. And I think, there's been some good in it, and I think there's been some bad in it as well. And so hopefully, we begin to move forward and progress in a more regulated world, because we have been completely unregulated. We went from, again, the pendulum swung when you think about NIL. It went from here all the way over to here, and right along with that, transfer portal, right along with that, just being regulated to completely unregulated. And now we've got to find the sweet spot moving forward.
It's like they took all the traffic lights away in just one day, right? You're just driving. There's no traffic lights, which maybe some of the traffic lights were in bad spots, but there was a purpose to it. And there was such a tug of war on what it should be that it's now do we start to maybe get to the middle of an agreement of college athletics should be this way, and neither side can completely have their way.
Yeah, you just reminded me a little bit of Dave Aranda with the analogy and the stoplights. But I think you're right. And I think what was disappointing, and not to go back, but there was a lot of work done prior to that July 1, 2021 NIL coming on board, and I think everybody in the industry felt good about it. And felt like this is a great thing for our student athletes. We want them to be able to earn some monies, build their brand. All of that had been so restrictive up to that point in time. And, there'd been a lot of work done up to that July 1 date in terms of rules, regulation, boundaries. And then, all of a sudden we begin July 1 and there are no rules. And so we did what we did best. We made up our own rules as we went along, and it was chaotic. And, we've been living in a, quite frankly, a pay-for-play world over the last 24 months.
For you, what do you maybe have the biggest questions still about? What are you most unsure about? And not necessarily to be negative, but obviously not everything's going to be just perfect. So what kind of keeps you up at night, if anything, that's still out there?
Yeah, and I think, you mentioned it in terms of it's not going to be perfect. I think we need to make progress. And then, continue to adapt and evolve and tweak. And so, moving forward, I think, look, there's a lot of skepticism publicly. There's a lot of skepticism within the industry, NIL, external NIL. Is that really going to work? Is it going to remain, pay for play, or Deloitte, NIL Go, is that going to work? And so when you think about the College Sports Commission and, really, really fired up about the hiring of Brian Seeley, but he's got a huge job on his hands when he thinks about, LBI and cap management and NIL Go, Deloitte, and then the enforcement piece of it. And so that's got to be real for us. That has to work. There has to be a true business purpose. and fair range of compensation when you think about these external name, image, and likeness deals. If there's not, then what are we doing? Why did we take on another $20.5 million annually, up to, and then plus we're still going to have unregulated pay for play? It makes no sense. So that's got to work. And I think, agents, we've got to find a way in terms of, agent regulation. I think there's some great agents out there that really have the student athlete's best interest in mind, but then there's some not so good. And I've dealt with one in particular that I'm not going to mention his name, but he should never represent a student athlete in our industry ever again. And so you're dealing with some of that. We've got to have, again, step one, step two, we've got to have some federal legislation. We've got to have state preemption. If, all of a sudden a state now, hey, we just don't like this, it's not working for us, this House settlement, so we're going to go and file a lawsuit. I mean, that can't happen. And so there's a lot of things that need to follow. But it starts really within the settlement. The external NIL piece needs to work.
You've mentioned the 20.5. You're all in for that. Have you already made up how you distribute that 20.5?
We have. Yeah, we have. And not to get, too complicated, but as a reminder, this settlement had two pieces to it, right? It had the back damages piece, which was settled at about just south of $2.8 billion. And within that agreement, it was determined that 75% of those monies would go to football, 15 to men's basketball, 5 to women's basketball, and then 5 to all of the other. And so we, Baylor, have really taken that formula, and we're using that in terms of moving forward and how we'll distribute the house monies, the 20.5, and we know that number is going to grow every year. But that's how we're going to do it, with some nuances and some tweaks. But and again, reminder that this settlement is, the term is 10 years, and so we'll see what this looks like.
I would say, and this is just me, that the settlement is 10 years. That gives you guys 10 years to figure out some sort of collective bargaining, antitrust, federal regulation amalgam. Is that how you got to, that maybe the leaders should look at it, is that you've got a decade to figure out how this is going to be maybe going forward?
Yeah, well, I agree, but I would just say we don't have a decade.
Yeah, you only have
we need to get this done, I think, fairly quickly. Again, I think the settlement, step one, not to be repetitive, but I think federal legislation is absolutely step two when we think about some liability protection, antitrust protection, state preemption of all of the state laws, and then student athletes, non-employment status. And by the way, I think there's a way to thread that needle where there's non-employment status, but we get to some type of, I'm going to call it and reference it, collective bargaining. But I think that's going to inevitably be another step in this process that we're going to have to get to, and maybe not for everybody, maybe not for every student athlete sport program, but certainly for some.
What happens if there is never some federal legislation that helps you guys out?
Yeah, it's so really hard to predict, but I think there will continue to be an onslaught of lawsuits, and how that plays out, certainly not certain. I'm not an attorney, but I think you'll begin to see cracks in the settlement without something behind it, and people are smart. They're
already picking it apart.
Yeah, they're already, and we know that, right? It's already been appealed, and we'll see if it goes before the Ninth Circuit. But so I think I worry about the sustainability of it if we don't have some type of federal legislation.
Mack, I sent Brent a video. Hunter Yurachek at Arkansas was discussing, with the money now being paid, the revenue sharing to athletes, that do schools then start looking at how they have treated them with the the amenities, I don't know if it's perks, travel, food, swag, all of that stuff. Does that Paul said that's part of the cost of business. Has that ever been discussed among you and any other ADs about, well, we need to back off a little bit on what we spend for them?
Yeah, I think it's the short answer. It's all on the table. I think there's a lot of conversations going on in every athletic department. I think everybody is taking a look at the services they provide and do they, one, continue to provide the same services? If they do, how do you deliver it? We're spending have spent a lot of time on the whiteboard, thinking about back to, how we're going to distribute the monies, 100 models looking at how we're going to do this. And I think, how we think about student athlete services is something as well. And, for Baylor, when we think about our life formation, student athlete services, so academics, spiritual growth, spiritual formation, character formation, those things are not going to change for us. We're going to continue to provide those. Now, how we deliver them may be different. I think previously we had a fixed menu, and now we realize not everybody is the same. And when you think about it and say, hey, not everybody's the same, well, not everybody's there 4 years. You have some that aren't even there 12 months. And so what's our responsibility, to that particular student athlete when we think about some of those services? And so, hey, we now have got to deliver it differently. So now we've got to have an a la carte menu in how we do that. And so those are all of the things that we're talking about. Now, I do think, as we think about inviting, student athletes, prospective student athletes into our family, we've really got to professionalize that and how we vet and all of those necessary steps to make sure, you're not going to be able to make mistakes, and you're going to have to stretch your dollar. And we have spent, Baylor has spent a lot of time in that area.
When it comes to Deloitte and NIL Go and finding what they consider a valid NIL deal, I'm curious as to what like an athletic director opinion is on that, so that just that people who are wondering, because if I'm a business owner and I want to pay an athlete to endorse my business and I want to pay them $50,000 and all they have to do is show up one day, I can say, well, that was legitimate. That was worth that to me, So how do they determine market value? And is that something that you have to look at and say, well, they got to show up to a car dealership for 2 hours on a random Wednesday and they're going to get $50,000? That doesn't seem like an honest day's labor. But if I'm the business owner, I can say, well, sure is to me.
Yeah, and I think Deloitte has done a great job of collecting data and really looking at NIL deals throughout the country. And so we, submitted, and so did, all the other institutions, all of our NIL deals. And so what do they look like? And so I think as they collected data, college student athletes, pro student athletes, entertainers, what do those deals look like? What do those deals look like, specifically public companies that have governing boards, that have, rules, regulations, have the Security Exchange Commission, that they have to follow those guidelines, et cetera. I think that's how they began to really shape, what this looks like, what's the market. And so, I think that was one bucket they looked at. I think, they're certainly looking at the institutional bucket. How successful has it been, in terms of postseason, what's its brand value, those type things. And then I think they're looking at the student athlete, individually, All-American, Olympian, all conference, those types of things. And so, but I think to your question, they have collected a lot of data and they've used that as a guideline. And you've seen some of the statistics out there that, were leaked or released purposely. 70% of the collective NIL deals would have been denied. And so that tells you that just that right there, you assume if this works, there's going to be market correction. And I think that's what's going to be fascinating. You're not going to see it this year, 25-26, because the settlement had not been signed, approved when the basketball transfer portal opened, when the football transfer portal opened, and even when the softball baseball portal. So it was just a mad dash to front load monies, get deals signed before the settlement was approved, and pay it out before June 30th. So we're going to have a lot of student athletes walking around with a lot of cash that haven't even participated yet, hadn't even played one game. And so does that get corrected now 10 months from now? And so that's when you'll see the market correction. And that's where, hey, I think there are a lot of people, including, prospective student athletes right now and agents going, is this going to be real? This isn't going to be real. And so that's the challenge that we're going to face as an industry.
Yeah, in terms of front loading, one of the schools in the Big 12 has made a lot of noise as far as that goes, and so that's all very interesting how that's going to work out. As far as the college football playoff, the 5 and 11, how much did you personally twist and turn over the idea of automatic qualifiers versus we're going to gamble on ourselves? We're not going to be reduced to being put in this box. We're going to go out and fight for what we kill, basically, or we're going to eat what we kill, basically. Was that a hard decision on your part? And I know it's a collective decision. Ultimately, the Big 12's made its stance known. We want 5 and 11. But can you kind of just take us into those conversations and the conference's point of view there?
Yeah, no, Craig, I appreciate the question, and I'm always going to say this as a qualifier because I have to and I want to, but I'm going to answer this question as the Baylor Athletic Director and a member institution of the Big 12. There wasn't a lot of debate within the Big 12, and I was, I was proud of that because there's been a lot of conversation about, Big 12, ACC, and get automatic qualifiers, get as many as you can, because just not sure what you can earn. And so I think, for the Big 12 and this were, football coaches, ADs in the same room, all together and say, no, what's best for football, what's best for college football, what's best for CFP is that, hey, you earn this. And so I thought Brett Yormark, I thought, the football coaches, the ADs were terrific in terms of landing in that space. And, we'll see where this lands. The management committee and the commissioners, I've got great respect for them. And we'll see, and I've got full confidence that they'll land it in the right spot.
Can I ask you a question as the guy who's the chairman of the College Football Playoff Committee?
You can. I'm not sure I'll answer it. But.
So I just read 3 or 4 articles from today. Everyone has a problem with the College Football Selection Committee. Here's another one that says the SEC and the Big Ten stalemate on how they want strength of schedule, the metrics or whatever. And I've heard a lot, and it has come from those two conferences that get all the money and want everything else, that the College Playoff Selection Committee maybe is not the answer. What's your response to that? Is that also because not everybody got their way in the first 12-game playoff, a 12-team playoff?
Yeah, I'm gonna thread the needle here. So I think I would ask the question maybe, and this is going to come across a little bit defensive. And this is going to be my second year, and only my second year of a 3-year term, and I learned so much, and I thought Ward and the entire committee did a great job. But I sit here and go, are those just excuses for wanting to get something else? Because I sit and I go
a negotiating point,
and I look over time. I mean, is there a year? And I ask this question, innocently and with sincerity. when has the committee like screwed this up? And put your hand down, Paul.
Florida State fan.
But
Florida State.
yeah, there's going to be a lot of debate
Mhm.
on Florida State. You know, that's the one that really stands out. And you know, personally, you know, I think they made the right decision. When you think about the criteria and everything that we're called to look at and look upon. So, you know, is there, you know, if not the committee, then what's the solution? Are we going to go back to BCS days? You know, are we going to go back to computers? I think there's a beauty of the selection process of the committee. It works for men's basketball. Works for women's basketball. I think it's worked for CFP. You know, people that don't have an opportunity to be, you know, right in the process, the amount of time that people dedicate to it, the amount of film and tape, all of the data at their fingertips, and then just the robust discussion and debate that goes on. And so I think at the end of the day, yeah, certainly nobody's going to agree, you know, on every team, but I think it's a really, really solid and good process. And so we'll see again where this lands.
As a dyed-in-the-wool centrist, I guess, is there a method like hockey where hockey uses certain, like they use some computer metrics, some, I guess you could call it BCS level stuff to pick the teams that go into the Frozen Four, that you have to have this certain thing to be considered for the playoff to make it maybe easier on the committee when it comes to what sometimes can come down to semantic arguments?
Yeah, I think, you know, and you're hearing a lot of noise right now publicly, but I think that's the process. Again, the CFP staff, Rich Clark and his staff, and they do a great job. Rich in his first year did a tremendous job. But the thing I appreciate about him most is how do we make this better, and how does this evolve, and what do we need to look at? What do we need to tweak, and what do we need to adapt? And so you see a lot of noise and conversation about that going on right now. And then I think, you know, in addition, doing that, you know, with the management committee in terms of, again, what does strength of schedule feel like? You know, are there any additional metrics? Conversations about, hey, should everybody be playing non-conference games? So all of that, I think, is part of this conversation. I don't think you can have it this conversation without bringing all of those elements into it. And so again, I've got great confidence in Rich. I've got great confidence in the management committee, the commissioners, and again, I'm honored and privileged that, you know, the selection committee has been you know, asked for an opinion as well.
Do you always have to do what we do? And anytime, I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but Greg Sankey and not so much Tony Petitti, he just kind of stays out of the way, but they say something, you're always like, what move are you setting up like a year from now, a year and a half from now? Because it just feels like there's this, like, just, I don't know, things seem to fall a certain way, and now they pretty much got what they want, because we know the SEC, for example, will have a number of at-large teams, more than probably anybody a good year. But now it's the strength of schedule. Well, who's that going to benefit? It's going to benefit them as well. And so how do you know, I guess you touched on it, having conversations about the metrics, but I do worry about that part of metrics can be favorable. Not every metric is built the same. So I think that's a really important piece of this whole thing. Yeah.
I agree 100% with you. And I think we all do that, right? We're all trying to think about 2-3 steps ahead. And I think, you know, this upcoming season, the 25 season, is the last year of this current agreement. And, you know, I don't know that we need to get to a place of unity during the summer, but I do think, you know, it would be good for CFP. It'd be good for the sport of college football going into the 26 and in the first year of the new agreement, that we have all of this settled and all of this worked out. And here's what nobody really talks about, and or at least I haven't heard. What is the impact of the House settlement going to be on competitiveness in the future? theoretically, if it's a cap of 20.5 and there's regulation on external NIL, what does that mean? And so now when we think about, yes, it's easy to say because of historically the SEC is going to get quite a few at large group. How does that change? Does it change? None of us know that as we think about going into this new world of college athletics.
And I think that's part of it is like history shouldn't matter for 2025's playoffs, but I feel like there's that trying to steer that in a certain direction. So I think we're all aware of that. I just wonder how it's going to be accounted for ultimately.
Yeah, I'm trying to – do you guys feel like there are two bullies in the room when it comes to what they want because they have more, they get more? Is that ever something you've thought about as an AD at Baylor or a member of the Big 12?
I've never processed it that way. Look, fundamentally, and I think, I grew up, hey, you earn a championship and you fight and you scratch and you claw, and the best team wins. And so I'm sitting here going, hey, that's what, when we think about crowning championships and particularly thinking about crowning championships throughout the NCAA, that's the way it's been done. And so, I don't spend a whole lot of time. I spend more time thinking about, quite frankly, and where we should spend all our energy is how do we make the Big 12 better in terms of football? How do we make Baylor better in terms of football? That's where I spend my time and my energy.
Is it strange for you to be the head of a committee that is completely out of your hands as far as what you're going to be doing a year from now? Like, you have some say in it as an athletic director when you have these meetings, but you're just waiting essentially for, here's the rules now. Is that hard? Is it confusing?
Not compared to what we've been through the last 2
Okay,
days.
so that's the easy question on the test then.
Yeah. No, I think look, we'll land in a great place, and again, I said I'm honored to be part of it. We've got great committee members. I'm excited about the 6 new members, one of them returning, the college football is such a special sport, and we talk about it. It's the number 2 most popular sport in America. And so I think all of this debate and all of the conversations that are going on right now are really good and healthy for the sport. And I've got, again, great confidence we'll land in a good spot.
You mentioned the Big 12. I mean, it's been frustrating in that teams have come so close. I mean, softball, there's Texas Tech with an opportunity. Basketball, Houston's right there with an opportunity. Arizona State didn't get to the final, but they made a nice splash there at the end of the season. Just kind of how do you feel about the mix now that it's all been mixed together for a year or two, and just some of the ways teams who maybe we didn't expect have jumped up and been able to make a splash, but just not quite maybe the tidal wave that you would like to see ultimately?
Yeah, I think that takes time. I do, and I think we'll get there. I've got great respect for all the athletic directors in the Big 12. They do a great job. They're committed. I think the presidents in the Big 12 are committed, and so everybody wants to win. At the highest level, people are all in. When we think about house settlement, they're each have their own unique set of circumstances, but I think they're all really committed to winning at the highest level. I think that's why, again, I look at this upcoming football season. There's going to be some great parity. Again, how does house settlement change recruiting? Does it change recruiting? There's a lot of conversations every year post NFL draft. The conferences that have most, going into or most drafted versus not, and so what does that look like? Does that change in terms of our programs? But I think we're in a really good trajectory, and I think you'll see, again, assuming that we have some of these regulations, some of these boundaries, particularly in NIL, that we're going to be this conference will be in a really, really good place. What's hard to figure out in all of these conferences is just now that they've become super conferences and you don't play everybody.
Yeah.
And so how that plays out also, that's something that, we talk about a little bit, but when you talk about 9 conference games and not everybody playing everyone. And so we still don't have any idea how that impacts all this as well. And, every conference now trying to figure out, hey, how do we best schedule regular season? But then what's that going to mean in terms of strength of schedule?
Yeah.
And so all of these conversations are needing to happen at the same time.
Well, I wanted to add, I mean, it's been almost a close but no cigar, I feel like, but it's been a really good show and it's really interesting time for the league. So that's kind of what I was getting at, is it's promising. If things do equal out, that, man, look at all these teams that are right there pounding on the door in multiple sports, one win away. And so, yeah, that's encouraging, I think.
No, I agree with you, Craig. I think it is encouraging. Like I said, I think the trajectory is positive, and I think you'll see the Big 12 shine in upcoming years.
Using just last year as the first indicator, again, it's the one data point we have on new, like how rosters are in college football and how things move around. There was a lot of, propaganda put out by a certain league about like, hey, for 10 years, this is what it's been. Well, I think now, like, historical data really doesn't matter as much, does it? Like, how hard is it to make sure that the data that everybody's told to focus on is just about the calendar year in which these games are played and not something that happened in the past?
Yeah, I think that, historically, I don't know that you can rely on that data as much to be a primary driver. I think just as we think about future, and again, it's going to take, I keep saying 12 to 18 months. It may be 18 to 24 months.
Mm-hmm.
Dust settles. What does this all look like when we think about, sport programs? Certainly when we think about sport programs at Baylor, competitively, I think we have positioned, football, men's and women's basketball really, really well for the future. But, at the end of the day, we're not going to know any of this for the next, again, 12 to 18, maybe 24 months to see what happens. Do we get federal legislation? Do lawsuits shape form any of this? Does the NIL piece work? All of it. So
my last question.
Yes, sir.
What keeps you up most at night? Making sure Baylor and the programs are competitive to win conference and national titles, or the constant change no matter what goes on in college athletics as an AD?
So I think both. I think they're both so integrated. And so, primarily my first responsibility is to do, all that we can. And I've got such a great staff. I think I've got, one of the best staff, if not the best in the entire country. They're smart, they're creative. They challenge, they make each other better. Really, really blessed to work with them. But our first job is to position Baylor so that it continues to compete on a national level. That we can, have a lot of success in terms of going to postseason and success within postseason. But how do you do that in this ever-changing world? And so both of those keep me up at night in how they interplay with one another.
Anything else?
No. And I was just going to say, and that's why, for us, we've made some changes within our athletic department. We now have a front office division, a major division. And so how do we professionalize that piece of it when we think about this new and upcoming world?
How much of a difference has it made to have all these facility projects that came in kind of under this almost deadline? I feel like the timing couldn't have been better for you guys to knock out a couple of big projects before everything kind of all hell broke loose.
Yeah, Craig, we were blessed, and we've said that, we got those in, right right in the nick of time. If we would have started those 6 months later, I'm not sure we would have been able to do that. And then there was this period of time where, hey, facilities don't mean as much as they did in terms of recruiting. What means most now is money, and you know what you're going to pay a student athlete. And now, you know, as we think about going into settlement, where that pendulum again swing back, and now if money is more equal amongst all of us, then now all of a sudden, hey, facilities mean something again. And so we're blessed that, you know, when you think about you know, our facilities, we're in really great place. So glad we were able to get them done when we did.
Thank you, man. Appreciate your time. Appreciate it.
Great to be with all three of you.
The college football playoff committee chairman, but also the director of athletics, of course, at Baylor University, Mack Rhoades, with us on 365 Sports.